Windswept Run appears as a serene expanse of Hisuian wilderness, defined by its steep cliffsides and river access. Located in the central region of the Obsidian Fieldlands, this specific stretch of eastern shoreline serves as a geographic bridge between several adjacent territories. The engine maintains an active, continuously refreshing data matrix beneath the terrain, populating entities based on a strict hierarchy of conditional logic. This top-down UI map reveals the area's underlying schematic. Stripping away the surrounding topography isolates the quadrant where these data-driven boundaries operate. To understand how the game determines what you encounter here, we have to deconstruct the variables that populate this specific coordinate, layering the systems from the permanent bedrock geography up to highly volatile dynamic events. Treating the map as executing software allows players to calculate and optimize their encounters by predicting the underlying variables. We begin with the geographic bounds. Windswept Run is flanked by Deer Track Path to the north and Nature's Pantry to the southeast. This footprint houses Layer 1, permanent, non-conditional assets hard-coded into the environment. These persist regardless of time, weather, or player progress. For instance, at the exact northern border on a rocky ledge, the engine maintains a hidden interaction point for Old Verse 14. Similarly, there is a dedicated spatial coordinate for the Alpha Star Avia, perpetually locked at level 32 as a fixed hazard. Layer 2, the spatio-temporal matrix, sits directly on top of these permanent fixtures, dictating the vast majority of standard base spawns in the area. This matrix generates base entities like Abra, Kricketot, and Weasel. The engine assigns them strict mathematical level bands, keeping them constrained between levels 9 and 12 during typical conditions. However, this table is actively filtered by the engine's internal clock. As day transitions to night, the temporal variable executes a swap of the zone's active memory, pulling the diurnal entities out and replacing them with a separate nocturnal dataset. In this specific subregion, the Zubat and Golbat evolutionary line acts as the primary nocturnal replacement, overriding the daytime occupants. Therefore, before the player even throws a Pokeball, the time of day serves as the foundational environmental filter for the entire biome's population. The generation matrix extends into the Z-axis. Layer 3 isolates the code for airborne spawns. These in-the-air entities are governed by code divorced from the terrestrial spawns beneath them. Species like Starly and airborne Golbat populate this altitude. While they align with the area's standard base levels, the engine assigns them separate flight behavior trees. Back down on the terrain layer, the engine utilizes a different mechanism to generate specific spawns, localized interaction nodes. These are environmental objects. They remain inert until the player executes a mechanical trigger, which forces the engine to run a specific spawn script. Shaking trees within Windswept Run are programmed with a single output. Activating one will generate a plant cloak Burmy. Similarly, engaging with a shaking ore deposit triggers dedicated spawner logic that produces Geodude. These nodes function as guaranteed microtables. Because they are tied to physical triggers rather than the global clock, players can force these specific encounters on demand. Beyond immediate physical triggers, the matrix constantly pings background variables known as progression gates, which track the player's overall story state. The primary gate checks the status of the local noble. If the noble remains in a frenzied state, advanced mechanics stay locked. Quelling that frenzy satisfies the check. This action gives the engine permission to dynamically generate non-fixed alpha variants within the standard spawn tables. Fulfilling these progression dates introduces Layer 4, dynamic overlays. These are macro-level events that override the zone's standard parameters. Mass outbreaks function as intense, localized overlays. When activated, the engine suspends typical species diversity and floods a specific geographic coordinate with a single entity. This process simultaneously forces a level spike. During an outbreak, a base entity like Kricketune jumps from the mid-teens to level 44. Space-time distortions act as a systemic override, replacing the area's standard code with a different rule set. The engine imports out-of-biome assets. Local limits vanish as entities like Gengar, Steelix, and Evolutions are injected into the zone, scaling up to level 80. By altering overarching state variables, the game transforms a quiet coastal path into a highly volatile endgame resource generator. Any single instance a player spends in Windswept Run is the composite output of all 4 of these layers executing simultaneously. The entities that populate the screen are the mathematical intersection of the internal clock, weather values, physical interaction triggers, and the current story state. Yet, even with this multi-layered system, the engine allows for hard-coded exceptions that bypass the standard logic entirely. The clearest example of this is Request 20, a specific mission flag that acts as a localized override. While this request is active, the game forces a unique level 12 chimchar to appear in the environment, an entity that otherwise has no place in the local tables. This proves the generation system possesses a priority command, capable of force-injecting specific event entities, regardless of the underlying temporal or geographic rules. Stepping away from the data readouts and returning to the physical environment, the perspective shifts. This coastline is a highly structured environment dictated by invisible mathematical laws. Recognizing the underlying layers of this matrix is how you stop wandering through the scenery and start manipulating the variables to generate the exact encounters you need.